Are we about to see an increase of a third on stamp duty? Hey, what's up guys? Hope you're all well. So if you are anything like me, you are probably seeing loads of headlines at the moment about the up and coming Chancellor's Spring Review. And in nearly every single one of the headlines, right next to the cost of living, inflation, and the crisis in Ukraine, is the increase on stamp duty for second homeowners and buy-to-let investors. And the talk of the town is that this is going to increase to 4% from the 3% current levy. That's an increase of a third. So to put it in context, if you're buying a £250,000 house, you already have a 3% levy on top of the existing stamp duty. You are going to be paying another 2,500 quid. But how likely is it that this is actually going to happen? I mean, what do we know about the current crisis? Yes, cost of living is massively going up. Interest rates are going to increase. And there are now other things that are going to impact the economy to do with this crisis in Ukraine. And we know that the Chancellor has to do something about this massive black hole of the deficit after the coronavirus mass spending. So is he going to be taking a two birds, one stone hit, create some more revenue, and in the eyes of the voters, go after the most unpopular target, which is landlords? There isn't really ever any backlash for when landlords are taxed more. So is he thinking that he's going to win some support from maybe the voters, maybe the Northern Powerhouse and this so-called red wall, whilst raising some money in doing the same? Personally, I think this could well be coming. I mean, the papers being left on desks and newspapers reporting it all over the UK isn't plucked out of the air. It is pretty credible and probably very, very viable. And I guess the reality is, if the deal is good enough, 1% isn't going to be enough to put a buy-to-let investor or a property developer off buying a residential property. And the Chancellor probably knows that, so he's thinking, why not capitalise and increase some of that crucial revenue to balance the books and try and sort this massive spend out. He isn't going to plug that gap by charging an extra 1% on residential purchases for buy-to-let landlords. So he's definitely got to find bigger savings and bigger taxes elsewhere to help fill that gap. And there is obviously going to be the debate that this will start to deter some of the buy-to-let landlords, which I think is a pretty weak argument. If it was ever going to have an impact on people buying a second property or people investing in property, the 3% stamp duty levy would have killed it a few years ago. It's a little bit like when the tuition fees went up from 3,000 up to 9,000 a year. Everyone thought the university life was going to be dead, and more specifically, that buy-to-let investors who rented to students were going to have to sell up. And this was a great opportunity because not only were people selling up, but people weren't buying, so we were able to step in and capitalise on a really niche opportunity. But like the stamp duty, that market has definitely not slowed down, and what's happened is the students have just increased their borrowing, and the government has had to adapt to that in terms of the increase in the value of student loans and how much people can borrow. So I guess that is one of the key reasons why I think it is going to come into play, because the Chancellor knows it's not going to deter the majority of buy-to-let landlords. And even though there is this huge argument and studies and debate at the moment that you should be scrapping stamp duty altogether and making it easier for buy-to-let investors to buy more properties, to bring more to the private rented sector, to create more homes for this massive demand, I don't think that counterbalances the increase in revenue that he is pretty much going to get without a downturn in buying with this 1%. And if you've got a purchase going through, I personally think you should try and get that exchange, if not completed, before next Wednesday, because I think this is going to be an overnight thing that they bring in. It's not going to be phased in. Otherwise, it's going to create a massive rush before the deadline of people buying properties to save 1%, and we'll see a massive price increase again where people pay 5, 6, 7, 8% more for a property to save 1% in stamp duty. However, when the 3% stamp duty came in a few years ago, I definitely talked about it at my networking events and I talked about it on social media, but I actually never did a video. I brought the videos in at a later date about it. And it did completely change how I looked at buying residential property, because I don't really want to be spending 10 grand on stamp duty instead of 2,500 quid. It's a massive chunk of your overall budget to buy that property. And even though the deals are really good, you're buying it below market value, you're getting a good increase on your GDV, the market's increasing, all of those things, I still don't want to spend 7.5 grand more than I was spending historically. And I guess when I do have to do it now, I just make the decision, whereas I don't do the deal and I don't spend the money, or I do the deal and it's such a good enough deal that it's worth spending that little bit extra money on. And it's that which people are going to have to continue when they're buying residential. But here's how to look at different deals to save on stamp duty altogether and not be really affected, be in that middle class bracket of people who will always squeeze the most from both directions, side by side and top and bottom, and having to pay these extra costs like this stamp duty increase when you could find other deals to mitigate that cost. Obviously, the first one is commercial property and land. Now, I'm a massive fan of these properties under sort of 350 grand, commercial properties that don't have huge development potentials. I'm talking about permitted development to create multiple blocks of flats, which is quite a large project. I'm talking about these small commercial units where they can become one house or two flats, or small little plots of land where you can build 1 to 2 to 4 dwellings on. These are great ways to buy cheap, save on costs like stamp duty, add significant value, and then sell or refinance completely tax-free to get your money out. And more money than you've put into the deal comes out completely tax-free. But taking that one step further, you can really start to get creative with your stamp duty. There's a lot of talk about multiple dwelling relief at the moment. I've personally used it a couple of times. The biggest win for me was when I bought a row of 10 houses. And the lawyer at the time thought that we were going to have to pay something like a collective stamp duty of a couple of $100 grand. We ended up paying 31 because it qualified for multiple dwelling relief. And there's now people going one step further where they're buying already made HMOs and they're saying, and those 5 bedrooms are 5 separate dwellings, so we're going to qualify for multiple dwelling relief. I've always been a little bit nervous about this. One, if you're buying an existing HMO, you're not probably getting the best deal you could get by buying a below market value property and converting it to a HMO. And secondly, if you are admitting that that is 5, 6 individual rooms on individual ASTs, you are going to get a massive bite in the backside for when it comes to council tax, because council tax will love any excuse to council tax charge each of those rooms, each of those habitable areas instead of the house overall, because they can charge you a hell of a lot more money. And more importantly for them, there is a written rule where the landlord is responsible, even if the cost is passed on or paid by the tenant or not. If they don't pay, they come after the landlord. And council tax employees love it because it makes their job a lot easier to come after a landlord who's well established, known to the area, and they know who's going to pay that bill, as opposed to someone who comes in, a professional HMO or whatever, who comes in for a year and disappears and they can't trace. So be careful when you are being creative, not for the fact that you might be doing it wrong, but you might not be doing it to the benefit of that project overall long term. But one of my favorites is the habitable property. And there again, there's been lots of videos, lots of posts, and lots of articles written on this. But in essence, if you tick one of the boxes where you can deem that property isn't habitable, then you don't have to pay stamp duty. But that does mean that you're probably not going to get a mortgage on it. And be very careful, if the solicitor is putting this across, he's going to let the mortgage lender know. So you need to make sure you've got the right type of lending in place. A bridging loan is a really good example of that. But if you can try and use the right lending for the right type of project and it's not habitable, or claim it's not habitable because it hasn't got a kitchen, hasn't got running water, hasn't got heating, hasn't got a bathroom, hasn't got a roof, all of these different things that you can claim, it's a great way of saving a lot of money in today's market, which could give you the edge over your competitors and the people who are trying to outbid you. But when all is said and done, the biggest win that's going to come out of this increase is going to be the fear factor. The people who either decide not to buy that deal because they don't want to pay this extra 1%. And if there is a shift in the market, a change in the mood, a change of appetite, you need to be ready, because I would absolutely pay 1% more to save 10% on a deal. And that's how you've got to look at it. The way the government keeps throwing this shit at the wall, some of it is sticking. They want it to deter people. But all I'm looking at is every time they bring in something to change the market, change appetite, and tax investors more, I look at it, it's just another way for them to open up a door for me to go in and take a couple of deals short term before that door closes. And when I say close, before everyone else realizes that they're actually missing out on some great deals. And it's happened probably 3, 4, 5 times over the last 5 years. And if you've been watching my videos for that period of time, you will have known that I have called it every single time and been right. So keep an eye on the announcement next Wednesday and keep your finger ready on the pulse to step in to any deal that comes up that could be significantly cheaper because of this extra charge. So there you have it. Keep your eyes peeled, stay safe. Hope you found the content rich, and I'll catch you all on the next video.